Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land, and welcome to DC Fans United. So, I've got two really cool guests on tonight. They are two fellow YouTubers and comic book fans, and we're going to be talking about the comic book industry, specifically how print comics have been in decline. It's no secret that in 2017, over 50 comic book shops closed across the country. So we're going to be talking about why we think that is the case and some possible ways that we can improve the situation. So first off, I guess I'm going to go left to right. We got number one Marmaduke fan. Go ahead and say hi, Marmaduke.
Howdy, and thanks for having me on, DC Fans.
Absolutely, and thanks for being here. And second, there's Matt Invictus, who has joined us as well.
Hi, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Cool. Thank you. And I appreciate you being here. You actually, your channel was the first one I ever joined for live streaming, so I had wanted to have you on ever since then. So, yeah. I guess there's a few things. I was looking at some different statistics. The year-to-year sales have been down for a bit. I guess 2016 was kind of a peak year, I think maybe because of DC Rebirth kind of bringing the sales up a bit. So 2017 was way down from 2016. The comic book units that were sold was down by 24% from December 2017 compared to December 2016. So that's almost a quarter drop. And that's not that's not unusual for the year-to-years from the late 90s all the way through. So I was kind of wondering, what are some reasons you guys think that might be the case? And I also wanted to point out, too, that while the amount of dollars that are being generated, like the comic book industry made more money in 2017 than they did in 1997, but they sold far fewer units. So there's some obvious price issues there, too. But I guess either one of you, what do you guys think? What do you think the issue is and why the decline is happening?
I tend to look at some other YouTubers just to get maybe a few different perspectives because it helps me, think through the different angles they look at it. Diversity in comics, he'd kind of look at it through the, political SJW Marvel angle and maybe that umbrella. He'd look at it more through a business professionalism angle. And so my thought is, I think it's a combination of factors. I think maybe the politics is one dimension of it. I think the unprofessionalism online is a second factor. And then I think maybe the, just the difficulty of a print comic book competing with a digital option. That's probably a third contributing factor. I think these all work together to make it a tough situation.
Okay. What do you think, Matt?
Well, obviously, there's many factors contributing to it, but something that I feel is probably more important than all of them combined is that most modern comics just aren't really worth reading anymore. They're very expensive. It's for a lot of people, it's hard to get print comics, but it's just I started out 2016 with a fairly large pull list, but it ended up progressively getting smaller and smaller, not because couldn't afford it or because I hated the characters involved. It's just the books weren't delivering. It's like comics at one point, they really meant something. Like people had a lot of incentive to go out, follow these characters, follow those stories. I just feel like most of the creators have lost passion for their art and they just aren't delivering products that are worth the money and efforts to go out and buy. So I feel like more than anything else, I feel like lapse in creativity could be harming comics and overall management.
That's a really good point. And we see that every day on Twitter. All these creators, I mean not all of them, but a lot of them, they post day in and out, but they hardly ever talk about their own creations, which I think to us is really bizarre. I know if I had a superhero comic that I had created and was on the shelves and it was going to be out in 2 weeks, that's all I would be talking about to people. So it's like you're saying, the enthusiasm is just, there's a big enthusiasm gap between the fans and the creators. And when the creators have that enthusiasm too, I think the fans really respond to that, even if they're a really small-time creator who doesn't have a big reach.
Because it's providing you a glimpse into the artist's soul. And I'm using the word artist broadly. You know, a writer is an artist in kind of a broad sense. It's fascinating to people to get a peek behind the window and see what goes into making something happen. And you know, that's the gift of social media. But if you don't actually use the social media for that purpose, you're not going to get that benefit out of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's bigger than just a lack of passion. That is part of it, but it's like using him as an example, James Tynion, who wrote Detective Comics for about 2 years now. He's by all means a fan of the characters he's writing. It's very obvious that he does love the characters in Detective Comics, but the book just wasn't that good. I feel like he just wasn't a great writer. He didn't have the best editorial team backing him up. So yeah, a lot of writers are impassionate, but a lot of them just aren't that good at their jobs.
Oh. Okay, one thing too, I was thinking, do you think that part of the reason there is a decline in sales is that there are just too many titles? And that could go to the writer quality issue too. You know, what is it? They list the top 300 comic books every month. You know, do we really, I don't know, do we really need all those titles when the bottom half can't break 10,000 copies and only the top 2 sold 100,000 to begin with? You know, do you think maybe if they pooled the talent, cut it, shoot, I'd cut like half the titles if it were up to me. And you know, because each company, we're putting out dozens and dozens and dozens of titles. Even Wonder Woman's barely, you know, sell like 30,000. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think quality, not quantity, is a good principle for any company and any artist or creative team to follow. I try to actually avoid buying bad books on purpose, even though it's kind of a popular subgenre of comic book YouTube. I try to buy books that I think I'll actually enjoy, with just a few notable exceptions. And I'm just struck by when there's that much stuff. It's not even feasible to go through to the comic book shop and just flip through everything. It'd take you a whole day just to flip through all the books that are coming out. So I mean, it doesn't affect me that much because I try to weed. I use the comics Twitter and comics YouTube community to try to weed it down to just the gold that I can find. And so I end up getting, you know, books I'm pretty happy with by listening to other people talk about their comics that way. But it still is just imposing because there's almost no point to browse through, you know, books I haven't heard highly recommended by people, because where am I going to start? You know, there are a few I can just spot and say, okay, I know that's bad, I know that's garbage just by how poor it is. But then there's a lot of, I think, middling books where it's not like, they're not so terrible that you can make fun of them, but they're not that special. And I had a similar thing happen to my pull list this year, where I kind of started out really enthusiastic. I want to support a comic book shop, and then gradually it dwindled down to, I'd say, like maybe like 20 books a week that I think are pretty solid.
Yeah, so 20 out of several hundred titles, that's, you know, 10% at best.
Yeah, my pull list is currently at 10 titles or less. And I do agree that there are way too many books on the shelves now. It's like if you go through the solicitations for any company, even the big ones, it's just there are so many titles that, you know, don't have a chance in hell. It's like even if they are amazing quality, it's like no one's really going to buy them just because there's so much stuff and they're just going to get lost in the tidal wave of new releases. And it's like, why do they even bother printing it? Without us making them much money. It's just, what's the point?
I don't know, it's strange. Okay, one thing, maybe, do you think some of these books, they have so many titles, do you think some of them are selling better on the digital end? Because one number I did look at was that digital comics sales have increased pretty much every year since 2012 or so. But the problem is the gap between the digital sales increase and the drop in print comics isn't equal. So there's still been a decline even though digital has increased. So I don't know. I guess I don't think there should be as many titles as there are, but do you think that the defense of there being so many titles is that they sell better online. Do you think that's valid?
Not really. I think digital sales are very overstated because they have grown since their inception. I don't think it's been every year since 2012. I think they kind of leveled out. But the thing is, the only reason they've grown such a high percentage is because they were so tiny to begin with. It's like a million times zero is still zero. And it's like it's higher than zero, but still digital sales are still overall less than 10% of all comic sales. So maybe for a small number of titles, digital could be their savior. I mean, at one point I heard Ms. Marvel was doing well only because of digital. I think Injustice did well because of digital, but it would only really affect a small number of titles overall. I mean, it would only sustain a very small number of books compared to print sales. So.
Yeah, and the companies, Marvel in particular, did seem to be giving away a lot of books on their digital sales. So I wonder how that all factors in too.
Yeah,
I don't think. Expert. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
You can go. I was just going to repeat myself.
Well, I'm not the biggest expert on following the numbers. That's kind of the newest thing to me coming back into comics. I mean, I read them a lot, but comics YouTube has kind of been my first introduction to some of the inner workings of the industry, and these questions about how is the industry doing? Well, will digital save comics? And I think you do need the physical comic still, because even if people will talk about this generally, digital blogs replacing newspapers, ebooks replacing books, and I think there's some validity to that. But as long as human beings have hands, we're still going to want physical objects. So kind of look from my perspective as a consumer, the nice thing about a digital book for me is that I can give away my comic and still go check out the story later if I want to remember it, or check out the artist or write a review or something. But the advantage of the physical book is collecting it, treasuring it, giving it to passing it on to a son or a daughter. And maybe because the question we've been asked is why what is the state of the comic book industry and how would we fix it? Well, I think the key thing we would have to focus on is what are the options for the print comic? Should you go in a cheaper direction and make them much cheaper to produce, like alternate comics? Should you go into maybe a much more like Ed Piscor's X-Men Grand Design Treasury? He really made it like put a lot of effort into designing that, so it would be a gorgeous book. It's not just a few comic books stapled together with some cheap glue. It looks like a beautiful thing you could put on your coffee table and say, look, I got this. My favorite book ever is the what is it, Will Eisner's The Spirit artist edition, because I already had so much admiration for him. So I get this giant book, not just because I want to read those Spirit comics, but because I really want to appreciate the details of his art. So I think if you were to ask me, I'm probably going to peter out of buying the floppies slowly, and I'm probably going to start buying either like cheap books from Alterna, and I'll probably start waiting to get like the big nice hardcovers from Marvel and DC as a way of just saving money down the road.
That makes sense.
I'm glad you brought up collectability, because it's like, I think that's the thing that really sets comics apart from other forms of prints. Like, not many people really collect newspapers or novels, but it's like comic books, yes, they are very collectible. That's why I don't think digital will ever overtake print in terms of comic books, at least. Maybe other mediums, but I think as long as comics are around, physical copies will always be dominant.
I hope so. Oh, and you were right about the digital sales peaking. I double-checked that on Comicron. Like you said, Matt, and it peaked in 2014, and yeah, like you're saying, it's only about 10% of the dollar value. So you're looking at, in 2016, $1 billion in comics, and 90 million of that was digital. So I don't know if that's going to be the savior of the industry. And I really understand it too, because I buy some digital comics, but it's mostly because I review them. You don't really want to spend something like $4 on a book you can't hold.
Yeah, $4 for a tiny file.
Yeah.
Computer file just feels like a ripoff.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the problem for them as far as selling it as a product. So that's really tough for the artists and writers. I'm not sure what the way forward is for the creators.
So there's two dimensions. There's the quality of the product, and then there's the price of the product. And both of those could be the topic of hours long conversation all by themselves. And then there's how they interact with each other. So if I spend 25 cents on a mediocre comic, whatever, I spend a quarter on it. That's something I'll drop in my couch and forget about. So let me just throw an idea out there, because I don't know who I saw this from, but I've been thinking about it. I read the Marvel Essentials books at the library as a kid, and they had that horrible black and white art. I didn't know what half the characters in the Marvel universe's colors were, but I got to read a big chunk of Marvel books that way, and they were printed on pretty cheap paper. And so the suggestion I see floated around is borrow ideas from the manga industry, not just the art style, but borrow the idea of having these sort of cheap, thick, floppy books. Like maybe I don't know, $5 for about 300 pages of comics, black and white on cheap paper. If I get a stinker like, if hypothetically Marvel or DC were to do something like that, maybe get a stinker like America. But I'll also, if I get even like 3 good stories out of that 300 or 500 pages, that's going to feel like a pretty good buy. $5 for about 3 good stories and maybe 3 average stories and 3 stinkers. Yeah. And then down the road, you could splurge on like the nice color, the nice hardcover book. Like the refrain I keep hearing over and over again is people who are used to the Western comics are used to having bright color, and that's a big dimension to the fun of bright, colorful superhero comics. But if we're talking about making it cheaper or making it more collectible, I definitely think printing black and white cheap comics. The thing is, you'd have to convince Marvel and DC that this is viable, but I know I would buy something like that just to get like a sampler of the stories that they have. And then the best ones, I would buy the beautiful color editions down the road.
Yeah, I think I've seen even a few pros talking about that, like Jimmy Palmiotti, the DC writer. I think he brought up a similar idea a couple years ago. So, I mean, I think it's worth experimenting with.
So
and to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of the new paper they use anyway. I have comics from my childhood that, I don't know, maybe they have acid in them or something. I don't understand what the benefit of the new paper is. Like the Doomsday Clock comics I have, they absorb moisture and stuff out of the air and kind of warp, whereas I've had comics from when I was a kid that are just sitting on the shelf and they're fine. They haven't warped at all. So I don't know if the paper is what's making it more expensive. Then in my mind, that's not worth it.
I mean, I guess theoretically it's more durable, but I'm not a paper expert.
Yeah, true. It just doesn't seem to be worth it. They might as well just go to the newsprint like they used to use if it cuts the costs. I mean, Alterna's what, $1.50 an issue? $2.50 most?
Right.
Yeah. I wish my comic book shop carried them. I wanted to get, what is it? Tinseltown looks pretty cool. Go West. They've got a lot of titles.
So this is something that's been interesting to me, but I don't see too many people talking about this. Now, maybe one reason why it's really interesting to me is I will buy a bunch of comics, and then 90% of them I will give away. I'll donate them to like libraries or give them away to kids or something. And so that means I usually I specifically will get all the DC books that have like a free digital edition with them, even if I don't know if it's the best book, just because I'll figure, well, I'll give it a chance, and if I don't like it, then I'll just give it away. So what are you guys' thoughts on like the practice of providing a free digital comic with the physical comic? Because to me, that is a huge draw to go buy the physical comic, because if I'm going to pay $5 for the digital and $5 for the physical and get the digital, then it's an easy decision to go buy a physical comic, support a comic book shop. I get my digital comic, and then some other kid gets the free physical comic. Maybe get them hooked. Maybe get them hooked on the medium. Is that something?
That's a great idea. They do that, don't they?
DC does it with I'd say maybe about a third of their books, and Marvel does it with all of their books, which has been kind of a redeeming grace for Marvel for me this year.
I think, yeah, DC needs to get on board with that. And, you know, honestly, I don't know, DC could improve in some ways too. Like that Wonder Woman book I read, it was $2.99. That's cool, but the last 6 or 7, 8 pages were ads, like not even broken up, just solid ads, and then there are ads throughout too. So that's another thing I'm not a big fan of, is how many ads they dump into these comic books.
They used to have now this could be nostalgia talking, but they used to do really fun, goofy stuff with the ads. You know, like Spider-Man saying, "Call this number, I have to save Mary Jane," and they'd actually have original art for it that would be pretty, you know, kick butt. They get their actual talented staff to make these ads. And I think it was 2017. Marvel tried to do this, you know, kind of pseudo-ironic retro thing with, you know, fake newsprint color and simple boxes and shapes, and that's not what gave the old retro ads appeal. What gave them appeal is they were kind of simple and goofy, but they would actually have some effort in the illustration. You know, like Spider-Man in a Santa Claus hat that's kind of cute and charming, and it's not just charming through the lens of nostalgia. It's even fun to look at the drawing and something like that. So
Yeah.
but that's kind of like a hallmark of, I think, you know, a industry that's so full of artistic excellence that they're just like overflowing onto their ads. That's how hopping they are on commitment to quality. So that almost might be kind of like a transition into talking about, you know, the other aspect of it. So if one aspect is, you know, the way the comic books are printed and sold, then the other aspect is, you know, what's it take to make a good comic book? What's good art in comics? What's good storytelling in comics? And that's kind of the broader, I guess, artistic or cultural topic.
I think suppose that too. I think they had like I think it was Snickers ads that tried to be a bit more clever and original. But truthfully, I don't even read ads. I don't even read them. I just skip over them.
I was thinking about that, the Snickers ad, but what kind of annoyed me was it was done exactly in the same style as the other characters.
Yeah, just kind of blended. Just kind of blended
right,
with comic art.
Right. So you'd be reading along, and then you're like, "What? Why are they fighting Doomsday?" Oh, Wonder Woman was hungry.
They gave you a little. They gave you a little clue when Batman would go, you know, save the Hostess fruit pies. You know, they'd have Hostess fruit pies at the top. So even if it still had that stylistic similarity with the rest of the comic, you kind of had a clue that, oh, this is the Hostess fruit pies ad. But I would read those because they'd be funny.
Do you remember the Colonel Sanders comic that DC did?
I haven't picked it up
a couple years
yet.
ago. Yeah, that was a weird. That was weird. That was really weird. It was, what would they call it too? It was like some kind of a crisis event too. That was so ridiculous. Okay, so another thing too, with the sales numbers, like I think they're a little inflated too, as bad as they are, right? Because of all the variant covers.
Definitely.
Yeah, for instance, Action Comics 1000 that came out. You know, they're really proud because it shipped like 450,000 issues. That's really good, but it had, what, 9 main variant covers, and then the main cover, and then a whole slew of exclusives. So if every shop's buying 10 covers, what does that mean? Like, how many issues did it really sell? Like 50,000?
Yeah, and I mean, Action Comics 1000, it is impressive, especially since it was so pricey. I think it was like $8. So it is impressive, regardless, that they got almost 500,000 copies with an overpriced book. But yeah, at the same time, it didn't actually sell that many. Yeah, they shipped that many to stores, but they've got a lot of unsold copies of Action lying around.
Oh, and you know what's funny too is the speculators are selling them online for like $25, $30 a piece, and people are buying them. They just, I guess they don't live where there's any comic book shops or don't know any better. But I was really concerned. I didn't get it that Wednesday. I got it that Saturday. And when I went into, I was thinking ahead, I was all concerned. Okay, well, I wasn't really concerned, but I figured I wouldn't be able to get what cover I wanted. It would probably either be mostly sold out or sold out. But when I got there, the whole row on the shelf below all the other DC books was all the covers for Action Comics 1000. He had all 9 plus the main cover. I was like, oh, I can choose. So paying more than $8 seems a little extreme. But on the other hand, I do think it was actually worth it because it's 80 pages. And yeah, it was actually really good aside from the Bendis story. And there was no ads. You say no ads, that's a big selling point to me.
Well, yeah, I thought I actually did record a review for Action Comics, but I lost it because the audio was jinxed. But I mean, yeah, I thought it was a pretty decent. It was the best they could possibly do at this point with this crop of writers, with this crop of editors. It was the best Action Comics 1000 we could have possibly gotten at this point in time. So hey, better than nothing.
Yeah, I guess we're kind of lucky in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Variance is another thing that kind of happened to comics while I was away, and then I come back and say, oh, they have all these different covers. That's so unusual. And I kind of look at it as it's my chance to sort of give my ultimate act of respect to the comics, to the comics people who I genuinely respect and admire. So I collected the variants for Batman White Knight because I was just completely fascinated with Sean Gordon Murphy's style. I thought the way he talked about composing and sharing those pics on his Twitter, that's exactly like what I want to see from an artist. It reminds me of the Renaissance, where they would, obsessively down to every little finger. They think about how every piece of the painting was pointing you to a different direction. So I got all the variants for White Knight, sort of specifically as a way of saying, I think this is something special. But apart from that, it just sort of looks, just from my perspective, it seems like a way of getting people who are obsessive about collecting comics. It's a way of getting a few extra bucks out of one of them. And, those are the comics that are going to go right into plastic and never get touched. So I get what Matt's saying when it's not like an additional reader. It's someone who's collecting, kind of paying extra to have a complete collection or to have what they may hope might become a rare variant cover of some landmark issue or milestone issue.
Mm-hmm. The way I see it, there should be, for most comics, there should be just one variant, like one main cover and one variant just for people who don't like the main cover. And I think DC does this most of the time. There are exceptions. I understand why Action 1000 had a million variants. That kind of makes sense. But then Marvel has this problem where it'll be like the 10th or the 20th issue of some book no one's really reading, and it'll have like 3 or 4 variants. And it's like, what's the point? The point is to inflate the numbers because more variants means they can ship more issues to the stores. So and they do these gimmicks too, and it's completely goofy because even if you are selling a few extra comics, the point of the cover is still to say, hey, you should buy this comic book. Here's an idea of what it might have inside. So like the Jim Lee art ones, I actually got one of those. The Venomized variants where it's just random characters with a Venom symbiote. That doesn't. I think that's like we've talked about like the experience of going into the comic book shop and there's hundreds of titles. That's like the worst thing to the new person. Oh, am I going to get an issue of Hulk turning into Venom in this comic? And they pick it up and it's not that. It's not good. What's the word? It's not good at conveying what the product you're selling is. It's bad advertising.
Yeah, the cover, even if it's a variant, I feel like it should reflect what's actually inside the comic.
Yeah, I think the worst ones were, I don't know if it's like the Marvel Comics action figure variants, and they were all exactly the same. It was just the character as an action figure, and they were all identical. They were so lazy, they didn't convey anything, and they did them for a ridiculously long time. Like I think around 2 years, we had those horrible covers.
I don't know.
They were not good.
I'm just glad I don't follow Marvel. Oh, but you were talking about X-Men Grand Design. That was one book I actually wanted to buy. I looked for it a couple times. That that looked really great. I was gonna break down and buy a Marvel book, but it was sold out.
I read Ed Piskor's Hip Hop Family Tree, and I am the guy who hates hip hop. I'll listen to classical music, but I just read it because the cover was interesting, and I was completely absorbed into this world of hip hop. So I kind of anticipated that, based on his ability to get me interested in, you know, the history of hip hop. Of course, he was going to be able to tell an interesting story of the X-Men, and I think that was like Marvel's hidden gem of the year. I've made it known that I started my channel because diversity in comics got me back into comic books. So maybe I talk about him too much, but I think he's used X-Men Grand Design as an illustration of what happens when you flood the shelves. Is that the gems get buried? You know, there's one X-Men Grand Design amongst what 10 books about the X-Men or various X-Men teams and characters, and
didn't Diversity in Comics give it kind of a negative review?
I remember him saying positive things about that, unless he did a follow-up where I think he said that the elephant in the room is that Ed Piskor has, I would call it like a cramped drawing style.
Yeah, he didn't seem him. I mean, he wasn't like roasting it, but he didn't seem impressed to me.
I recall him calling it a gem, and he hasn't, like, one maybe mark of whether you really like a comic is if you return to it again and again and review every issue of it. And I've actually slowed down on my comic book reviews, but I really want to revisit X-Men Grand Design and maybe talk in some detail about how well it's just a fantastic example of condensing stuff. Even if it's sometimes it's almost that its fault is so packed that reading it is you have to squint almost to read all this. But for what it is, for condensing the entire history of the X-Men in one thing, it's a brilliant concept, and it's a rush to read it because you just feel like you've read 50 comic books after finishing one of them. So I don't remember if DNC roasted it or not after the video I saw, but I'm gonna move the needle for that book if he does it.
Well, let's be honest, that guy, will go from loving a book to completely hating it just between issues.
And vice versa. Like, he spent all summer talking about Chip Zdarsky being horrible, and all of a sudden Chip Zdarsky is the best thing ever, and I was just like, what? Wait, what? Like, I can't even follow you sometimes, Zach. Like, but he isn't super rigid in his thinking, I guess. I don't know.
He has a very particular set of tastes. I think that Diversity in Comics can identify what made the 80s and the 90s action comic something special, and so he looks for that. And then, kind of maybe outside of those parameters, he's very critical of his content. So it's interesting I think one of the interesting aspects of his channel is that he attempted to be an artist, to mix success. He'd show his portfolio, he'd show drawing tutorials, and sure, we could all roast the art of Jawbreakers, but he was able to give it's a mix, little talk about the story, talk about the art, and that's an important dimension to comics. It's certainly as my introduction to comics YouTube, it's certainly helped me kind of have the focus that I can't just talk about the art, I can't just talk about the story. I want to talk about what makes this a good medium and a good vehicle for storytelling, and that's the combination of these two elements.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just one thing. There's a lot to it, right? I guess that's why most comics have, there can be ones created by individuals, but usually you have 4 or 5 people work on a comic between the editing and everything. Mm-hmm. So there's a good point here in the chat. Was it Edward Brewer? He brings up a good point. He says, what about ease of access? When I was a kid, you could get a new release at the grocery store. And that is really true. I remember doing that. My mom would be shopping and I was a little kid, and you'd see the spinner rack and you'd grab a couple and beg her to buy them for you. But now, shoot, I can't, I have to go 60 miles to find a comic book.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who thinks the current distribution system is well thought out. I mean, pretty much, no matter where you fall on the spectrum of comic fans, pretty much everyone can agree that the distribution system and Diamond are horrible and are holding everything back. So, hey, at least we can all unite in our hatred of something.
I think this is the point where we could say the problem comics are having financially is even bigger than just the poor quality of the comics themselves. Because the kid, my dad, he would tell me stories about buying the Captain Marvel comics back in the day, and he's like every other baby boomer. Oh, I'd have been rich if mom hadn't thrown out all my comic book collection. So for that generation, the comic book was their Netflix and their television and their movie theater and their Twitter and their YouTube. So now comic books aren't just competing with other comic books; they're competing with the magic of the internet. And I don't know what the answer to that would be, because I'm kind of a chauvinist that reading is still important. You gotta develop good reading habits to get anywhere in life. And people would give comics a lot of flack, but that was a popular reading medium for a generation. And we have the advantage of, you can make the pitch to parents, hey, parents, give your kids comics. It'll help them become readers. But we also have the disadvantage of competing with tons of free entertainment. And, if it's got a lot of sparkly, Candy Crush blasting lights on it, that looks more appealing to like a hyperactive young mind than something they have to sit down and read. And Matt, I've actually got a question for you. From your Young Justice profile pic, I've had the experience while tutoring kids that I'll show them an episode of Young Justice and they will completely dig it. It's like the Young Justice cartoon is a crash course on secondary and not very famous characters from the DC universe, but putting them in the spotlight. So the kids I've shown Young Justice to, they probably have more connection with Superboy and Kid Flash and Robin than they do with Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. And then I'll try to read the Young Justice comics to them, and they'll be interested because they're interested in the characters. But you can tell that the TV just I don't know. There's something that kids like about TV that you have to work hard to get them interested to read something.
Mm-hmm. It's really a change in our culture. Like you're talking about the baby boomers. To them, reading a comic was a really easy, casual, almost childish thing in its just simplicity. Now, I think to a lot of kids, reading a comic book is almost a chore. It's like, oh, I got to read something, whereas we're used to, reading a conventional book. So to
something
us,
I wanted to bring up. So
sure,
sorry, you can finish. Yeah, I was going to say something I wanted to bring up. Like, what part of the reason we don't see comics on like newsstands and grocery stores as much is because they're more, I guess, serialized than they used to be. It's like it's harder to just find a jumping on point. So there's like more crossovers, just everything's so much more complicated. You can't just like go into the grocery store, pick up a book and expect to be fully invested in it. You're just like always in the middle of something. So it's like they're a harder sell than they used to be. And attempts to like streamline things, make continuity simpler, always end up making things worse. Cough, cough, the new 52 cough. So it's like, on one hand, you don't want to throw away all the continuity because that'll just cause more bigger issues. But at the same time, they got to make these things like easier to get into. You got to stop with the constantly making everything big. Just go back to the days of just good, simple stories, and then I feel like that could help. I guess increase readership because it's hard even if you're already a hardcore fan of comics and you love all the characters and everything, it's stressful as hell. Let's be honest, being a comic fan is stressful as hell no matter what your tastes are.
It's hard to keep up with. I think part of the glut of events and crossovers and stuff is just trying to stand out from the crowd. I mean, I wouldn't mind reading some real simple, easygoing, Golden Age style stories, but when there's 300 titles on the shelf, they're trying to, I think that's part of the selling point. And when you look at the month-to-month sales, the books that do the best tend to be the ones that do stuff like that, like Doomsday Clock.
This was a contributing factor to me giving up on Western superhero comics in high school. I don't remember the title of the book, but I remember it really well. It was a Green Arrow graphic novel where Green Arrow had been dead, and they were going to bring him back to life. And it was the most convoluted way of bringing a character back to life I'd ever seen. And
is that Brightest Day? Or?
Oh boy, it's not Green Lantern. It's Green Arrow. It was when Jason Todd was still dead, because I remember they had this little bit where Green Arrow's in heaven, and they see Jason Todd go flying by, and they do a joke that, oh, they're never going to bring that kid back to life, ha ha ha. And
wow.
So, but what I remember about it is it was kind of dark and gross, and it was also making fun of the Golden Age. So they, had this bit where he pulls out a boxing glove arrow, and oh, do you remember how silly it was that he had boxing glove arrows, but also had like this weird, creepy priest guy who was murdering kids. I just remember thinking, what are they doing? They're making fun of the Golden Age of comics and how silly it is, but they're telling a story about this evil monster priest eating kids and bringing the Green Arrow back to life. So it's not like they're it's not like modern comics are Shakespeare and 50s comics are all stupid. They're still doing a ridiculous plot, and I think my word for it is it's gritty without depth. It's edgy for the purpose of being edgy, and those are problems that precede the SJW politics in comics. These have been problems for comics as far back as there have been like convoluted universes and characters constantly coming back to life. And Matt talked about having simple stories, and I think that's a real important thing. But then the problem the comic industry has is they have all this established continuity. So what are you going to do about that? And one thought I've had is I want to see Elseworlds come back. I want to see Marvel do its own version of Elseworlds, and I would like the Earth 616 and Earth 2. I'd like these to be like the goofy universes where everything is canon and you can have all of this universe-ending stuff. But the idea of an Elseworlds book or a Batman Year One or The Dark Knight Returns is they're telling these stories without necessarily worrying about, oh, well, here's what universe it takes place in, or here's what timeline it takes place. They throw away all that, like, oh, it's these versions of the characters from this universe. They just say, okay, here's a story about Batman, and then I don't have to care about the time travel shenanigans. I can just get invested in a adventure story, and maybe it becomes more complicated over time. But it's separated from this sort of convoluted. Even the Wikipedia articles can't make sense of all of it, kind of stuff.
Yeah, to be fair, DC is like kind of doing that. I mean, I don't know if they're technically Elseworlds. They'll have to double check, but they are like doing a new line of books, like Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, that are meant to be, I guess, a bit lighter on continuity. The problem is that the creative teams aren't that good. It's like it's more Snyder on Batman, Frank Miller on Superman. I don't think anyone thinks that's a good idea. And they're okay, I won't go into super detail. But it's like they are kind of doing it, but they're kind of wasting the opportunity by not getting the best writers for it. So
Frank Miller is old, but I remember I wrote an essay about superhero archetypes for my senior year in high school, and I remember finding Frank Miller's quote about not wanting to see sweat under Superman's armpits. I want to see him fly. So people think Frank Miller hates Superman because of his treatment of Superman in The Dark Knight Returns. But I don't know if his old age is going to maybe start creating a problem for Frank Miller to write on the top of his game. But I'm not worried that he can't write. Well, yeah, you cannot. Say that again.
Miller's been in for a decade at least. I mean. Maybe not his writing. His art's pretty bad.
Oh yeah. You can definitely see the effect on his art. I mean, this is a comics legend. This is a comics legend who's nearing the end of his career.
Yeah.
No two ways about it. But I think that he could have a good Superman story in him. The thing about Frank. the thing about Frank Miller is, you know,
He is no.
he doesn't do anything
No,
by
I love-
halves. Nothing by halves.
No, I loved Batman Year One, but this isn't 1985. Like, you got to keep Frank Miller far away from Superman.
Yeah, I've stopped trying to make sense of Frank Miller. He's just, I just see him as this like big ball of crazy. Never know what's gonna. And the thing is, I do feel bad for him. I think he's like got cancer or something. If like at conventions, he just looks so old and weary. So it's like, okay, I feel bad for the guy, but at the same time, looking at his work alone, separating his artist from art, the guy's a ball of insanity. So it's just, I'll just take whatever comes out of him, judge it on its own merit. But
I just feel like he needs to, you know, just kind of retire with dignity. Like, Stan Lee hasn't been making comics anymore.
mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like Jack Kirby. No one would ever say anything negative about Jack Kirby, and I won't either. But the later he got in his life, the more his art quality declined. It's just, you know, people get old, and, you know, they know Frank Miller's name sells. And it feels like, you know, with the Dark Knight, Master Race, or DK3 or whatever, and stuff like that, like, they're just dragging this poor old man out and propping him up and being like, look, buy our trade back. It's written by the guy who wrote The Dark Knight, you know? Like, I don't know. I just hope he's doing what he wants to. And I agree with Marmaduke. I definitely respect him. It's just, keep him away from Superman.
Yeah, the thing for Frank is like, you know, even if I don't like everything he's done, I'm glad he existed, okay? I feel like he's had, at one point in his career, he had a very positive influence on comics. And even when he's bad, it's usually like in Elseworlds. It's like All-Star Batman, not good, but at least it didn't really affect anything in the main continuity. So I can still respect him, even if he's let me down a few times. He's an interesting guy. He's fun to talk about.
What do you think, Marmaduke?
I'm thinking. I think I have a similar opinion to everyone else. You know, like I remember the first time I read The Dark Knight Returns, I was probably like 13. I felt like I was reading I thought, oh, this must be what X-rated books are like. Yeah. And then I returned to it a little older, and then I kind of got a sense for what Frank Miller was doing. And I love Batman Year One. I think I returned to The Dark Knight Returns because I love Batman Year One so much. And then, what was it? I didn't read All-Star Batman because I would hear people saying about how bizarre it was and how he was making Robin eat rats, and you know there was the meme on the GD Batman. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's not the Batman.
The whole thing's a meme. The whole series is just one big long meme.
Right, and then I read their interpretation that this is Frank having a laugh, maybe even at his own expense. So, gee, I don't like that kind of. I don't know. I'm telling the story, but I'm not really telling the story. It's a joke, but it's not really a joke. That's not a sense of humor that really clicks with me, unless you got to be like a master of comedy to really make that click. So would you say that it's actually an effectively funny book if you go into it with that mindset?
Well, I think it's an exceptionally funny book regardless, but I haven't heard anything about him being self-aware with it. It's like, considering he hasn't really done anything good since, I don't know, since or anything, he hasn't really done any good books. So it's like, I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty sure it was him sincerely writing a Batman comic, and that's just how it came out. But either way, it's worth reading.
All right, then I'll check it out. Hashtag move the needle.
Because it's like, all right, Dark Knight Strikes Again. It was his Batman book before All-Star, I believe. It was like, it was by all means him writing a serious story. It was him doing a serious follow-up to Dark Knight Returns, and it was just as bad. In a different kind of bad, but it was all bad. So regardless, Frank was past his prime. So,
DC Fans United, have you watched Young Justice?
You know, of all things you would think I would have, but I kind of missed the boat on a lot of the animated stuff.
Okay.
So I just, you know, I've seen the TSA, you know, the Superman animated series and Batman, but I'm behind on those, unfortunately. So.
Okay. So I
hate to admit it, but I haven't.
That's all right. I have a thought on the animated series, and you know, ever since I, knew we were going to do this chat and I saw Matt's, profile pic, I thought, oh boy, I bet Matt's got some thoughts on this. So I think about the use of animated series a lot and how important it is for these superhero characters, because they tend to try to, dumb some of the complicated stuff down a bit when they're trying to get it into a 30-minute format. And when I think about something like Young Justice, where I think about it is 30 years from now, 50 years from now, I'm going to be showing Young Justice to, to my kids in the future. It is going to be a gift that keeps on giving to DC Comics for generations. And I think Batman the Animated Series has had an effect like that for the character of Batman. Superman the Animated Series has probably had it reintroduced 90s kids to the Superman characters, like the Fleischer classic shorts did. So I think about the cartoons a lot as being a really important vehicle for long-term success for the comic book industry. And so, part of the topic has been, well, what are we going to do to improve things in the future? And there's immediate things you could do to try to fix some things, and then there's long-term things you could do to try to get generation after generation after generation of kid hooked on these characters. So I'd say Matt, do you have any thoughts on that? And I don't know, what would you hope to see from season 3 of Young Justice, for example? How could something like that help? It wouldn't be like right away. It's not like kids watch the cartoon and then they go right in the comic book shop. But what effect do you think that's going to have? Maybe down the road, 10 years or so down the road for DC.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that DC in particular is far better at animation than they are at live action. I mean, I know some of their recent animated films have been not so good, but overall, they got a much better track record with animated shows than they do with live action stuff. I think stuff like Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, the Bruce Timm stuff captures the spirit of the comics way better than most of their films have. Young Justice in particular, yeah, I agree with you. I think that it could have been a great vehicle to, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Get readers sorry,
like a
word salad. To get younger people immersed in superheroes, if the network didn't screw it over. But season 3 in particular, I have some worries about season 3. I have some worries about the direction of the show and whether the cast is too bloated. But I think that if done right, I definitely think that it could get people excited about the comics. Because like Young Justice, like even if it did have some trouble with the studio, it does have a very dedicated fan base. It's clear that people are very committed to this show in a way they aren't for stuff like what was that, Justice League Action or the DC animated films. So I think that the type of storytelling we saw in the Young Justice cartoon would be a good thing to strive for in not just animation but comics in general, because it's not overly serious, has a sense of humor, but at the same time it isn't a ridiculous cartoon like Teen Titans Go or the Thundercats reboot. So
oh man,
getting back to the comics, I feel like this kind of tone has been sorely missing from comics, where it is a straightforward superhero story, but at the same time it's not afraid to have fun. It's not afraid to have serious dramatic moments, but at the same time you're having fun watching it. So that's a skill I think that a lot of writers are missing out on, and it's kind of contributing to the fall of comics. They just don't know how to strike that good middle ground between fun and serious. So that's my answer to your question.
I think my thought kind of though is shows definitely help, but something as successful as the MCU, like the most successful thing ever basically, that isn't selling Avengers comics. I'm not sure an animated show as good as it is will move much product. It might help a line specifically tied to that, but Avengers that comic doesn't sell well at all. And where's the disconnect? Like, why is that?
I think
the month that Spider-Man Homecoming came out, Spider-Man didn't sell very well, so my thought on this is actually a lot more pessimistic. There's a big, huge, enormous fan base that watches this stuff, but it translates to a very small percentage of people who then go and buy the comic, if at all. And if they do, generally they're probably going to pick up a trade back.
Well, the problem with the event. Sorry, you can finish.
Okay, I was just going to say, I think that this is really key, because this is where we're getting into kind of a disconnect between, I think, the comic book industry and the massive number of people who appreciate these characters. A massive number of people go to the Marvel movies. A very dedicated following of people will support the Young Justice show, but that doesn't translate into many comic book sales. And I think that just to use an illustration, DC has some version of the Young Justice Aqualad character, but it's not his name, and it's like it's a completely different character, except that it looks like him, right? So I actually did a whole video about how I think that Aqualad is one of the best new superhero characters ever created. That version of the Aqualad character was created for that show, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah,
and there's absolutely
he existed, but he was a different person.
Right,
there's multiples.
Right, Garth or the Golden Age Aqualad's a different character. So if I want to get the Young Justice Aqualad character, there is no comic book about this incredible character that they invented. He has heroic depth. He has weight. He is a heroic character, and they think that the solution to that is to make up some fake version of the character who he has white hair like him. So I think that the comic book industry is kind of like missing the point of what people like. So even if someone like me is passionate about the Young Justice characters, I apart from going back and buying old Young Justice books that inspired the show, there aren't many books for me to go buy to say, oh boy, I love the show, now I should go buy the comic. They're not making new comics to meet that demand, but it actually it hasn't translated into me buying like lots of new comic books with these characters, but it has translated into me buying older comic books which feature these characters, because that's where you get the emotional connection. I don't have a strong emotional connection with tons of superheroes, but the Young Justice show was able to give me an emotional connection to about six or seven new superhero characters, and quality always trumps. Like, I'm not going to buy a bad Spider-Man book, but I don't think you can de-emphasize the importance of having an emotional connection to the character. I'm always going to be at least interested to see if Spider-Man comics are good or not, because I have a childhood connection with them. And really good dedication to your craft, passion about good storytelling and good art. That I use the phrase "move the needle" too much. That's not the right word. It reinvigorates the passion people have, because it reminds them of what they've always admired about these superhero stories. So I think that there's this cycle. If you start telling good stories, it gets easier and easier and easier, because then you've got people interested down the road in that. If you start getting in the habit of telling bad stories and phoning it in and getting cheap art and getting phoned in scripts, then it's going to be a steady Wile E. Coyote falling off the cliff. As soon as Wile E. Coyote looks down, then gravity starts acting to him and it crashes.
Yeah, Teen Titans comics have not been readable in a long time. I think the last good Teen Titans was like a Jeff Johns run, which ended in like 06, 07. So they do not give a damn about the Teen Titans, which sucks, because they're insanely popular outside of comics. Like, they got the cartoon, they got the crappy cartoon, they got a theatrical film coming up, and probably won't be very good, but it exists. They just keep half-assing the Teen Titans, and I think that there is some petty motivations for that. I think that they're afraid of like the younger heroes, like stealing focus from like the big guns or something. The sidekicks taking focus from their mentors. But getting back to like Avengers, which we talked about a minute ago, there's a pretty serious disconnect between like the Avengers on film and the Avengers in the comics, because when you look at the Avengers on film, they are a huge deal. They are by far one of the most important cinematic franchises of all time. They are a beast. But in the comics, they're not really that big a deal. I mean, yeah, they do have a lot of like they do have like a lot of like the big A-list Marvel heroes, but overall they just don't generate the same amount of hype. I mean, I think that the X-Men will always be Marvel's most popular team, no matter how much they sabotage them. It's like the X-Men are always going to be, in terms of popularity, the A-list team. But it's like when you go to the films, it's reversed. It all has to do with management.
Yeah. So it's really insane that they don't at least try to translate the sales in the box office into comic book sales. I'm looking at Comic-Con right now. So Avengers Shards of Infinity #1, I would certainly assume that that's their tie-in to the movie. It was the 56th best-selling book last month with only 32,000 copies, which puts it, let's see, about 12 spots below Wonder Woman. So that's not very great for the biggest, grossing movie of probably the year at least.
And to be fair, Avengers comics were selling better in like 2012, 2013, around the time of the first film, but that didn't last. The success didn't last. So it's like, yeah, I think that the comic sales of like I don't know, like 5 or 6 years ago, they do prove that there is still some money to be made in print comics. They can make a profit if they know what they're doing. We just aren't seeing that amount of effort or quality or passion involved. So
let me float something out there that might spark you guys, because I wouldn't know how to go about accomplishing this. So like one theory might be, let's manage decline. Like the print industry is going to die. All we can do is try to like mitigate it, or make the transition breathable. And one thought I've had is, I call it like smaller but smarter and stronger. So if you're not producing 100 titles, you're producing 10 titles, but they're 10 freaking good titles. So and then the question is, like comic book shops. I think I've told the story on our last live stream, actually, about how a comic book shop owner loaned me the comics that he thought I should read out of his personal collection as a way of getting me interested in franchises I wasn't interested in. So I think there's a general and very genuine concern for helping these stores. One way is buying the product, and one way is thinking about, well, what can we do better? What can the industry do better? So what do you guys think if we don't want to just manage decline and kind of like mitigate, the death of comic books as a medium and the death of comic book shops, what does a strong comic book shop look like? And if you could like imagine like the perfect comic book shop in your minds.
Better part of town, first of all.
Is that
like nicer looking building?
Is that a reference to the Great Change robbery of 2018 that went down in Canada? It's the greatest crime spree ever.
Yeah, the thing is, like, I like my local comic shop just fine. I mean, the staff are okay, but I mean, it's like comic shops, they have a reputation for not being the most appealing places, and it's not entirely undeserved. They do tend to be in like the lower end strip malls. If you see them from the outside, there's nothing really welcoming. A lot of the times you go inside them, this has happened to me a few times, and it's just not a good environment, not nice staff, the customers aren't nice. It's just not the kind of place you want to visit locally. So I mean, I feel like there is a lot that the shop owners themselves could be doing to help grow the business, but there are also some problems. Like, I might as well bring this up. Certain shop owners will ban people from their stores for supporting a crowdfunding campaign they don't like. That's literally it. It is this poor kid. He donated to a Kickstarter that they didn't like, banned for life. I mean, so that's the moment where I'm like, all right, it's official. The store owners are helping to kill themselves. They are shooting themselves in the head.
The dude had a pull list, right? he was buying tons of comics, and they kick him out simply because he likes a book and tweeted about it, right?
Yeah.
That's my understanding of the story, and I've checked out. People were talking about it before DNC made a video about it. It was kind of like the viral underground news story of comics Twitter. Yeah, goodbye free money. Take the money, throw it out the window. It's the opposite of the Stephen Fry. So we've touched on like this political dimension again, maybe as like one of the various contributing factors.
It always comes up. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just to interject, one of the articles I read on this did bring that up too, as politics is hurting comics. They're getting too political. People are turned off by that. They just want entertainment. They go to the MCU movies because they're entertaining.
But don't you know that comics have always been political? You know that?
I know.
There's a panel from 1940 that says so.
I know that Jack Kirby drew a cover where Captain America punched Hitler.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whenever someone brings up that line, a puppy dies. It's just so missing the point. So ridiculous.
All those Spider-Man comic strips for the past 50 years in the newspaper, those were always about politics.
Yeah, and the thing is, while we're talking about politics, I did a thread about this like a few weeks ago, and it's like literally everyone knows that comics have always been political, have always had political messages in them. There is not a person on earth who does not realize that. But it's like if you actually go back and read those old comics, it wasn't nearly as common as some people pretend it is. Like I've read more Spider-Man comics than the average guy, and I'd say that maybe 5% of them total had, even in passing, any kind of political or social commentary. And even the X-Men, which like everyone knows, yeah, they're an oppression metaphor. They touch on social themes sometimes. If you actually go back and read like those super famous runs like Claremont's run and stuff, yes, they have their moments, they have their stories, but overall, it's just straight up sci-fi superhero stuff. It's about science fiction and character drama foremost, and then you might have a bit of social commentary every once in a while. It took a backseat to the characters. Okay, that's how comics have always historically been. So these people use this, but comics have always been political. Therefore, your argument isn't valid. They're just a bunch of posers. They're phonies.
And like anything else, when it isn't something that happens all the time, it hits you a lot harder. So now that comics are almost always political, it's like the boy who cried wolf kind of thing. But back in the day, when they hardly ever were political, and it was just, Captain America going on adventures and doing different things. And then when he got real with you for a little bit, you were like, oh, wow, I see how this relates to real life and how, all this stuff. Like they don't have to hit us over the head with it. It's art. It could even be political without the dialogue being political. Like, they need to think things through a little bit and not just want to sell an agenda, sell a story. And
exactly. And the thing is, like,
the story happens to have politics in it, so be it. But the politics shouldn't be the foremost, intention of the writer, in my opinion. And if it is, then I don't want to buy it.
Yeah, and then the thing is, like, comic book writers back in the day, for the most part, they were smart. Okay, these were smart guys. It was like, what's his name? He did the famous Green Arrow, Green Lantern book. Dennis O'Neill.
Dennis O'Neill, yeah.
Oh,
yeah. I don't agree with all of his views, but he was a smart guy. I could at least respect him. Alan Moore, smart. Again, he's kind of crazy, but at the same time, very brilliant. It's like these modern comic pros, they're all hysterical. It's like these guys have a lot of them have serious mental issues. I don't want these people telling me what they think or what their worldview is. It's just like, get mental help. Keep that crap to yourself until then.
I have asked the thought experiment, and I will ask this to if I'm friends with a writer or artist, I'll usually at some point in during the course of our friendship, I'll ask them this question if they write stories or draw comics. I'll say, do you think that you could write? And then I'll say, like, fill in the blank, a character who is fill in the blank, and make them sympathetic? Could you write a I don't know, a Trump supporter and make them a sympathetic character? Could you write an anarchist and make them a sympathetic character? And I think the mark of a mature writer is that if I write about a story where, you know, like communism comes up, I hate the commies, but I would at least want my communist character to be a human character. And I think I have a feeling certainly that because there's a lack of empathy in the comic book industry for people with incorrect viewpoints, that it actually becomes hard for them to sympathize with people enough to write a story that seems human. So you don't get like an X-Men story where, oh, okay, the Christian parents, okay, this is a metaphor for gay marriage, but it's kind of a sweet story where, you know, the parents are loving. Instead it'll be like this, but Bobby Drake laughing at his parents derisively when they offered to take in the young Bobby Drake and give him a home. To me, that is a like really instructive moment to say, where I look at that and say, this person doesn't know how to tell a story in such a way that, okay, so he's using the X-Men as a metaphor for gay marriage is what this is, you know, and this person doesn't know how to write that story in such a way that the opponent of gay marriage could read the story and say, oh, okay, I identify with this Bobby Drake character. The parents of Bobby Drake are a caricature of, you know, the religious parents who oppose gay marriage, and there's nothing human there. There's nothing to connect with there. And so it actually fails as propaganda as a result of that. Like I could write a better gay marriage propaganda Bobby Drake book, because I could make his parents very sympathetic.
I remember that.
It's like it's not even good writing. Stereotypes.
They were caricatures, right? His parents. They were just straight up villainous, you know, and they just hit you over the head with the message they want you to absorb. If they kept things a little more vague and a little more subtle, it would be a lot more relatable to people because it wouldn't be so specific. You know, the X-Men, the way they used to be and the way they are when they're well written, I think anyone can relate to them because, yeah, the X-Men are different, but guess what? Everybody is different. You don't have to be gay or a specific race or anything to get the X-Men message, or, you know, that one of their messages. You know, the X-Men doesn't even always have to have a message. That's one thing they forget too.
Yeah,
just
so
go out there and take down some Sentinels. Come on, it's fun.
Yeah, it's like Dark Phoenix, like arguably the most famous X-Men story of all time. Very like little to no social commentary, and it didn't need it. Yeah, it's like there's good X-Men stories that do the social commentary. There's good ones that don't. It's just they're a superhero team first and foremost.
Let's see here. I got one. I think it was X Factor, and it had Multiple Man, and Multiple Man was talking to himself. He was sort of going through a psychotic break, and one aspect of Multiple Man's personality wanted to like believe in this new cult, and another aspect of Multiple Man's personality was a bit more skeptical. And I shared a pic of that because what I realized what it was it's a critique of identity politics, because the whole thing he's saying is that there are manipulative people who will use your identity to try to convince you to follow their way of thinking and commit your life and money and energy to their cause. And you know, it takes I don't know if the person who wrote that's a traditional conservative or a libertarian or anything. That could be a good old, you know, classical liberal author of that. But you have to have enough perspective on life to recognize that there are political causes that want to rope-a-dope you in to being their little servant, and that takes maturity, and that takes listening to a lot more perspectives outside of your little bubble to get that. You need a little maturity in life to get that conveyed in your comic book storytelling.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue with a lot of the modern writers, is they didn't live a rough and tumble life, or really any kind of life outside of just, you know, suburbia, some kind of college, and then they started writing. You know, they didn't fight in World War II. They didn't have to struggle. You know, it's like diversity in comics often says you shouldn't write a superhero book unless you've been in a fight at least once in your life. And you don't have to have won the fight, you just have to have been in one, so you know what it's like. You have to know what it feels like to take a punch, something. Just, and not even that specifically, it's just like whatever you're writing about, you have to draw from some kind of real life experience. And a lot of these folks, they've lived on Twitter, and that's it. Like, what are they going to write about? So you get that story about She-Hulk. What was it, like 6 issues where she's talking about a YouTube cooking show?
Oh, God.
Like, come on. Stuff like that is ridiculous. So I don't know. That's why we don't have stuff like my friend Martin here in the chat brings up Sergeant Rock. We don't have stuff like Sergeant Rock. We don't have war stories. We don't have mysteries. We don't have DC's House of Mystery. We don't have weird Western tales. We don't have Star Spangled War stories. It's I don't know. What do you think, Matt? You haven't talked for a bit.
Yeah, I was just gonna say these guys, they're a bunch of pampered hipsters. It's like
Really?
and it's like, the thing is, like, this is the kind of a problem with Western art in general. I feel like I don't know, the more perfect society gets, I'm not saying that the world's getting better or anything, because it really isn't, but it's like the less problems the world has, the worse art we're going to have, because we just don't have enough to draw from to form conflict. And that's the problem, as you were saying, with a lot of these modern creators. And this extends like comics as well as Western animation, as we've seen. It's just the people writing them, they just don't have enough life experience to write compelling conflicts. It's just all they know is like this, like, sappy. The only problems they can think of are just these really sappy, petty, superficial problems. They can't write drama convincingly. They can't write comic convincingly. They are like scared to touch on any content that might like make the reader uncomfortable or anything. It's just these people come from just a walk of life that just doesn't give you enough good ideas. So yeah, I feel like the industry is very handicapped right now when it comes to finding talent.
Matt, what do you see the role of comics fans and customers on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, the entire social sphere? What role do you see that playing in promoting good books and in helping the future of the industry?
I feel like if a comics pro working for a major company is going to open themselves up to social media, that they should be, I guess, mindful of their behavior, mindful of the way they speak to potential fans. They should make themselves and their product look good. Now, like I'm First Amendment advocate. I think that people should be able to believe what they want and share their personal views to an extent. But at the same time, if you work for a company, you have a product, you are representing your company and that product. So there is definitely a line to be drawn when it comes to how people conduct themselves. If they want to share their personal beliefs, if they want to say, I hate such and such politician, I support such and such politician, I feel such and such on a certain issue, you know what? They should 100% be allowed to do that. But at the same time, they need to be more mindful of people who don't share that view. And for that reason, I think there are some serious issues with the way comic pros connect themselves online. It has gotten better, if only because some of the more toxic people have left entirely. Nick Spencer, Dan Slott, they've left social media, so I think Marvel deserves some credit for that. But
Mark
at
Waid.
the same time, there are still problems.
Mark Waid too, right?
Yeah. He's been gone for Twitter for a while. I believe he left Facebook too. So
hey, what did you guys think about Patch Searcher like flipping out and then leaving?
That guy needs to check. He needs to be checked in.
Yeah, he's bipolar, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think he came back and he unblocked me and others. Yeah. So, it's like, okay, good. You seem to be heading in the right direction now. But, people still have the screenshots of when you were doing like jokes about unmentionable sexual acts to your customers. So even
Wow.
if someone is heading into the right direction and okay, now they're not freaking out, it's like that still lingers. People remember when you do that. And I don't know. I did a video shortly after that where I made the kind of political connection, because what I think about, I think about SJWs always turn on each other, or can't SJW cannibalism a lot, because I kind of see that as maybe the worst aspect of the culture war that's crept into comics. I mean, we've kind of danced around this. Oh, politics and comics, and one is politics in the stories, and the other is literal politics of people destroying each other and trying to get rid of their political opponents. But now we're having these discussions about comic books and who makes comic books. And our boy Larry King Undead, he kind of roasted me and said in the first live stream, and his joke was, show me on the doll where the SJWs touched you. But I dug that roast. But the reason I like to talk about it so much is I kind of see that as the I think that's going to be what's going to. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I think that we're going to maybe be looking forward to about 10 more years at least of this kind of nuttiness generally, and of course in all the popular media, including comic books. And then what I'm hoping is that SJWs themselves are going to make their politics known enough so that people, left, right, and center are going to have a feel for what it is they believe and what it is they want, and say, oh, I don't want that. But I'm pessimistic enough that I think that it's going to be a problem for us going forward for a lot. So I've asked a bit about what role do YouTubers play, and I'm firmly convinced that we shouldn't all be talking about politics all the time. That's not the appeal of comic books. But I think we should be aware enough of the political dimension so that we're not caught with our pants down all the time, because because I'm expecting it to get worse. One thing I expect to start happening is more lists of enemies of diversity on comics Twitter, and watch out for these accounts, watch out for these creators, they're they're every ist in the book. And it's going to get to the point where like the nice little normal people who don't say anything controversial, they're going to get all that as well. And my reason for suspecting that is, who was it? It was Zoe Quinn going after Kotaku, because Kotaku did a tweet that said, like, we were harmed by Gamergate. And then Zoe Quinn said, oh, you think you were harmed by Gamergate? I was super duper duper harmed by Gamergate. So it's descended to the point where they'll attack each other over who was harassed more by the evil Gamergaters. And of course they're going to do that to not just people on the right on comics Twitter and YouTube. They're going to do it to everyone who isn't part of the club on comics Twitter and YouTube. And I think that's the aspect that certainly has disgusted me the most. Is I was upset even when I just heard that comic book stores were talking about not carrying Jawbreakers, let alone when Antarctic dropped the book, because I see that as sort of the opening salvo to people saying, oh, well, you want to make great YouTube content and articles about superhero characters, you want to do your own comics, well, guess what, we have eyes and we remember your wrong things. So I'm a little, the pessimist in me worries about this, but the optimist in me hopes that if we're smart and then we'll be able to weather out the silly season.
Yeah, honestly, I'm hoping that Generation Z will be our savior, because let's face it, it is a lousy time to be a kid in this society. It's a lousy time to be growing up. Everything sucks. Yeah. Everyone hates each other. Everyone is miserable and wants to die. So it's like, all right. On one hand, I feel bad for kids and young people nowadays because they're just being raised into this shitty, toxic environment. And when Generation Z, they're adults, they're going to have some issues. They're going to be I believe, a very messed up and disturbed generation, just because they were raised in this just environment of sewage. But I'm also hoping that maybe because of the way they were raised, because of the trauma that was inflicted upon them, that maybe they'll have some reason to fights for human decency, that they're going to be motivated by just this horrible environment. And I'm not just talking about like, you know, political correctness and social justice warriors. I mean, it sucks to grow up under like someone like with Donald Trump as the president. It sucks to grow up with like a lot of these like far right politicians and stuff. So it's like there's more than one bad guy in this situation. So I'm just hoping that, like, you know, Generation Z, just because they were raised like in this lousy environment no one should have to grow up in, that they'll have the backbone to fight for human decency that millennials don't. I'm just hoping that it's like I was talking about, you know, these millennial hipsters, they just don't have enough problems. They don't have enough hardships in order to, like, you know, like have compelling drama, fight for decency. I'm just hoping that Generation Z will correct that. We'll be able to correct that. So that's my hope. It's not much, but it's something.
I also think, well, so we're, Matt, are you in the millennial generation?
Technically, by identify as post-millennial.
Okay.
By 1 year. I'm 1 year away from being Generation Z, so
okay.
Yes, I am Generation Z.
All right.
Remember, I thought you were like 30, Matt?
I'm 22.
Yeah.
Okay.
You seem older than you are.
Lots of people think that I'm older.
So you're in your 20s, and this is sort of like the magic of YouTube. We're offering feedback on, you know, good and bad things in the industry, and, you know, DC Fans United, you're hosting these conversations, and this has given me a chance to, you know, conversing with someone, you know, voice to voice. We're not face to face, but it's better than the 240 character limit, because it gives us a chance to think through some of these problems out loud almost, but then also have someone bounce it back. So I think I think we can't underestimate the importance of comics customers themselves in promoting the industry. Because Matt, when you talk about you know, wanting simple stories, and you contrast what makes Young Justice work with, you know, the Teen Titan books, you're providing a free service to DC Comics. You're identifying a product you don't want to buy, and you're identifying a good example of something that that did speak to you. And if I were a creator at DC, you know, you can't listen to every single opinion, and because then you'd be constantly changing, trying to please everybody. But you have to listen to stuff like that, because that's where you get the feel for what people are actually looking for in their stories, what appeals to them in storytelling. So if you look to Gen Z, I kind of look to, you know, technology as a double-edged sword. You know, it can curse us, it can have all this, you know, sucky stuff going on, but it's also giving us an opportunity to talk about important things that predate the fight coming to comic books, that we need to talk about in order to know what the heck is going on in the industry. And I really look to the medium of online communication as the hope that the industry has. Like, even if the industry cleaned up its act tomorrow and was producing lots of great books, that'd be a great start. But we need like vibrant people saying, "Hey, parents, go get this book. Hey, DC fans, do you like Batman? Guess what? This was the best Batman comic all year. Go get it. Oh boy, oh boy." And I think that's
You know, our feedback, I think, is really important. One thing, though, that seems to be happening is they're actively not listening. You know, they're blocking us, they're ignoring us, they'll change the subject. I mean, not all creators are that way, but I don't know. We're definitely not valued as customers as much as you would expect.
Mm-hmm. And then sometimes, like, they do listen to people, but it's the wrong people. It's like depending on people's views or their beliefs, they can get their way just by screaming at the top of their lungs at creators until they get their way. Like I don't know if you're familiar with like the crazy Poison Ivy fans, that whenever she's written as even being remotely villainous, they'll like have this like weeks-long temper tantrum on social media until DC caves to them. And it's like, if someone like and if someone on the opposite side of the fence were to do the exact same thing, if they didn't have the right views, they'd be labeled as just like this horrible harasser who's like terrorizing pros on social media. force their agenda upon them. But then other people do the exact same thing, and they get their way. So they are totally playing favorites.
What do they call it? A coordinated harassment campaign?
Yes. In a targeted harassment.
Yeah.
The horrible act of, like, you know, replying to someone on Twitter is now an act of horrible harassment.
My mentions.
Yeah, that's all they're talking about. It's just like getting too much attention on social media. The comments, they don't even have to be abusive. They don't have to be harassment. They can all be this completely valid, polite criticism. And if you get too many of them, it's harassment. And it's like a lot of people when they're replying to someone, a lot of them don't even know that this person is getting this amount of attention. So it's like it's not even any one person's fault. But it's just they don't even care. It's weaponized harassment claims. They're just exploiting the idea of harassment in order to demonize people.
Sure, they're complaining about getting attention so that they can get more attention.
It all started in gaming. I mean, my God, I've had so many PTS flashbacks, like the worst parts of Gamergate. And I say PTS ironically.
Right, unlike Heather Antos.
Unlike certain other people.
Too many mentions. It's given me PTSD. You know, like, oh man, that wasn't a very wise thing for her to say. Oh well.
Mm-hmm.
So, too many variant covers.
Coming around full circle.
You're back to that. No, yeah. I don't know. It's certainly not just one problem that's causing the comic book industry to decline. It seems like it's a whole host of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so optimistic about Generation Z, though. Everything's trending towards paying less attention to things and everything getting to be more digital. I mean, it'd be cool if they kind of went back to it, but I don't know. And but the median age on comic book customer now is like 35, and it's climbing.
Yeah.
So that's pretty crazy when the median age should be like 15 or something, you know, maybe 20. Like you get the kids and the adults in there, but I don't know. It's a very changing medium. I don't think it'll ever die completely, but it might become kind of a niche hobby, even more so than it already is.
Well, I have seen studies.
Oh, go ahead.
I have seen studies saying that, like, you know, certain like young people, Generation Z, are like, you know, getting kind of sick of, like, you know, everything being digital, and they're like showing more interest in, like, you know, print and physical entertainment. But I'm sure you can also find studies saying the exact opposite. So it's up. You never know. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, one thing a guy here in the chat, Edward Brewer, just brought up is that kids are priced out of comics. And that's kind of true, too. You know, it used to be something they could just buy with some change or their allowance or whatever, but you're starting off at $4 or $5 per issue. You know, they'd probably buy a video game or something instead.
Yeah, I don't think we're going back to the 12 cent days anytime soon.
I hope so.
Yeah. But yeah, it is insanely expensive. I mean, I personally have the money to spare, but even then, sometimes every day I'm coming home from the store and I'm like, is this really worth it? Am I really getting enough enjoyment out of these books to justify the money? And in my defense, I have cut back a lot. Again, my pull list has shrunk, but yeah.
Well, that's the thing, too. Adults can buy it. It's like the toy market. Most of the toys are kind of a high-end thing now, too. Well, they're either really cheap garbage or they're priced to sell at like $20 a piece. So it's like there's the nostalgia market, but what are the kids buying?
So Matt and DC, I've heard you talk about Gen Z in maybe slightly different ways. So DC, you've talked about Gen Z as maybe not being, you know, potentially big comics customers for, you know, issues we've talked about, you know, like all the competing stuff. And Matt, you've talked about Gen Z as potentially being a correction to millennials because they're sick of PC. culture. If millennials wanted PC culture, then Gen Z was raised in PC culture and wants out of it, which I think is an interesting idea. I've heard this sort of read on Gen Z circulating from a lot of people, but I'm not sure I have a strong feel for what Gen Z is going to be yet. Like, you know, I have a feel for, you know, the baby boomer generation, both kind of like the conservative and the left and the right. You kind of get a feel for what a baby boomer is still. I have a feel for the millennial generation, but I don't quite have a feel for Gen Z. So are you talking kind of from your experience knowing Gen Zs who are just a couple years younger than you, or kind of articles you read? What gives you your, you know, finger on the pulse for Gen Z?
Well, honestly, it's too soon to know exactly what's going to become of Generation Z, except that I'm positive that a significant portion of them are going to grow up with some serious issues because of just how the world is. They're going to have like a lot of them aren't going to have a real sense of identity because they're just so confused by the nonsense that's being shoved down their throats all the time. So Generation Z, they're going to have some issues, but what the end results of their upbringing, that's up for grabs. But honestly, I guess I'm going mainly by my experiences in high school and on social media, talking to people my age, the few times I go on Facebook anymore. So I feel like Generation Z is not stupid. I think they're smarter than millennials were at this point in their lives. But at the same time, they're a lot more confused. A lot of them don't know what to believe because it's like they were like, you know, raised on one set of values, and now things have just changed so drastically over the last few years. They're now being like, have a different set of values shoved down their throats. They don't know right from wrong. They don't know left from right. They're gonna continue to have a very unsure sense of their personal identity or their place in the world. So I think that could get chaotic about 10 years from now, because again, it's not a good time to be a young person in Western civilization.
And you're saying that because you're seeing when you say like more complicated, is it because you're identifying like more political issues creeping into more areas of life? I guess my illustration would be if I think back to my childhood and you asked me kind of to define, well, what's the big divide of the day? You know, Democrat, Republican. Well, you could probably list, you know, a few economic issues, a few social issues, but then you try to describe the political situation today, and boy, we've got alt-right, we've got libertarian down there, we've got alt-centrist over here, we've got Antifa over there, and we've got new issues. Is that kind of what you're identifying? It's like politics itself seems to have become more complicated in the last few years?
Yes, exactly. It's just there's so many ideas flying around. Just no one knows left from right anymore. It's like, okay, I have a pretty good memory. I can remember what it was like growing up in, like, I don't know, middle school and high school and stuff. And it's like, things were simpler back then. Even though I'm young and that wasn't so long ago, at least things felt normal, okay? Under like
things have,
Bush and Obama. No matter what you think of them, they were normal politicians. But nowadays, it's just everything's insane. We got a reality star in the White House. It's just like, you know, everything's blowing up. Everyone's... It's just, for the love of God, stop killing people.
Yeah, killing people's never good. Superman does not condone killing people.
Yeah, it's just like, everyone, for the love of God, stop killing each other.
It's a crazy world, though. I'm kind of glad I was born when I was. It seems.
I'm glad I grew up when I did.
Yeah, it's just getting crazier and crazier.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe these kids growing up with crazy experiences will turn around and write some good comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and good everything else.
I hope so.
I definitely think what they hear, like, so the rising generation, you know, probably looks to YouTube to get info. So I definitely think that YouTube channels like ours and others that have been involved in live streams, those are going to be pretty critical in introducing new readers to comic books they should read and ideas they should think about art and storytelling. So it's not like we always had to be perfect representatives of politeness all the time, but I do think a lot about. I had a dad comment today about how he showed one of my Thundercats videos to his son, and this son wants to go into animation, and the dad says watching your video was sort of like this, oh, the light bulb clicked on, and he said, oh, that's what artistic passion looks like. And I was just so moved by that, like, whoa, there's like a real dad and a real son out there in the real world who watched a YouTube video I did, and that helped the son think about artistic passion. Wow. And I love feedback, but that was almost like a waking up point of, oh, okay, people actually watch YouTube videos in real life, and that affects how they think. So I kind of want to model that in the content I produce, even if I'm talking about moral or political issues. I want to kind of model a kind of content where you might disagree with me, but at least you've got a grant that I'm trying really hard to take this seriously and get the facts right.
Wait. You're talking about making content specifically for consumers? That's crazy. You should tell Marvel this idea.
Well, boy, I mean, Ethan Van Sciver just showed Marvel how to get 40,000 people interested in comic books you're making. He made fun of some Rose Tico figures. He does live streams where he draws pictures of Rose Tico looking goofy, and so that's 40,000 people who are now interested in what Ethan Van Sciver is doing in the comic book field. Why doesn't every single artist do a YouTube channel where people joke about there being a glut of Let's Plays? Everyone and their cat plays video games on YouTube. Why isn't every comic book professional and their cat doing a channel where they draw goofy pictures and take requests and draw people's weird OCs, as a request or something, and build interest in the thing you're really good at doing? You're really good at drawing pictures. Show that off, because that's maybe sadly, kids don't want to go out and buy your comic book, but they want to watch your YouTube channel where you draw cute and cool pictures and live stream it. And that's like the wealth of young people. They don't have jobs anymore where they'll go buy a bunch of comic books, but they have lots of free time, and they devote their free time to watching interesting people. Capitalize on that market.
Yeah, I think YouTube is the comics YouTube is a much healthier environment than a comics Twitter or comics Tumblr or anything else. I think the few sensible creators left should definitely start investing more in YouTube.
It's a lot to do, I guess, if you're drawing and have a schedule. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, if they have time to go on a Twitter for 1,000 hours a day, like screeching incessantly about whatever, then I think they have time to upload a couple YouTube videos a month.
That's true. Yeah, that is a great point, and it is a good way to promote your own stuff. I don't know. It's almost like EVS is ahead of the game on that. I don't see really any other comics pros with channels. I guess John Malin has a channel too, but he kind of started after EVS.
Yeah, Frank Cho starts a YouTube channel and it's all over.
Oh yeah, Art Germ has a channel too. I don't know. I guess I don't keep up with it.
Yeah, I like Art Germ.
Yeah, the Andy Kubert School has a YouTube channel too that I like. Sometimes they'll show like classes that were actually taught by Joe or one of his sons. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Art Germ's great. He's my favorite digital artist.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've been a fan of his for a while.
So good.
Great stuff.
Using YouTube to try to be a personality is a bit of a distinction from using YouTube as a tool kind of to document, like business. Tons of businesses have YouTubes and they don't get that much interest. But I think it's even valid. Like, so one dimension of EVS's channel is, he'll make fun of Star Wars, right? And that's helped him grow it. And that's separate from, I see those kinds of videos as very different from the appeal of watching EVS draw. But even if you don't want to go on YouTube and kind have some fun and make fun of stuff and voice your opinion. You know, that's risky to a lot of people. It's still advantageous to just put up a camera, even if you have to like be silent and focus and document your process. I think that has value to it's a smaller subsection of YouTube than, you know, people who are interested in listening to people talk about Star Wars, but I think there's definitely an interest to see artists at work and just watch the creation come into existence.
Yeah, you do that on your
pulling
channel.
People in. I mean, if you can like connect with the people who are pissed off with the Disney Star Wars, that's not a small group of people by any means. Hey, if you can get them hooked in, then maybe get a percentage of them to check out his, like, you know, comic book stuff, get them gradually interested in like I don't know, comic book culture. That's great. And it's like a lot of people talk about, like, you know, just using like superhero movies and cartoons and stuff, so like, you know, get people into his comics. Why stop there? I mean, just use anything that's popular to like draw people in. I mean, Star Wars, hey, or hatred of Star Wars, or precisely.
Yeah.
If you can pull people in through shared hatred of the new Star Wars movies, I think that's fine.
I get it from a marketing standpoint, and I saw it like has doubled his subscribers. But come on, EVS works at DC. How long has it been since he's done a comic book video?
That's a good point. He did go a bit overboard.
Yeah, like I followed EVS for a long time. I followed him before he had 10,000 subscribers because he's a DC artist. But you know what? I haven't watched any of his Star Wars videos, and I even like Star Wars. I watch like Geeks and Gamers and channels that are specifically for Star Wars, but it's like, bro, you freaking work at DC. Maybe talk about it sometimes. Yeah. I get that you want to sell Soilo t-shirts for $22 each, but come on, bro. It's not all about money.
I think he needs an intervention. He needs a Star Wars intervention to to get him off of his hate crush on Rose Tico.
I don't know if he even cares about Star Wars all that much. I think he sees dollar signs, and YouTube absolutely rewards you if you have Star Wars content. I don't know why the algorithms are that way, but Star Wars is king for some reason.
No, I think he's genuinely obsessed. I think he genuinely has a hate crush on Rose Tico.
Hate crush? That's a good way to describe it, I guess.
Yeah, he's just obsessed with her.
I don't know. He's definitely good, but I'll be glad when he gets back to, you know, talking about Green Lantern and stuff.
I like that he's mixed in a little bit. Like he'll do art related to Rose Tico, so it's still on topic. This is the second live stream in a row where we ended up talking about how we don't like EVS Star Wars content. Come on, Uncle EVS, watch DC Fan United's live streams and get the hit.
Right? Maybe I should tag him. Just have to watch.
Yeah, can you develop a hate crush on, like, I don't know, Squirrel Girl or something, so we can at least go back to talking comics.
At least talk about comics. It doesn't even have to be DC.
Yeah, draw Squirrel Girl in a Slave Leia bikini.
Oh man. Actually, don't do that. Just keep talking about Star Wars. It's fine.
No, the old Squirrel Girl, back when she was kind of cute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Back before it looks like she got hit in the head with a plank of wood.
Back before she looked like she was recently put in a microwave.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, no, it was like an action figure. Someone took it and they put it in a microwave for a few seconds, so that everything is just like kind of lightly out of place.
It just gets the plastic kind of soft on her face.
Yeah.
Oh dear. We should suggest that to him.
Mm-hmm.
We should all do live streams where we draw EVS, not talking about Star Wars. See, just wait for him to notice when about 20 separate people all do a live stream with a similar drawing topic. We all randomly start drawing EVS and not talking about Star Wars.
Could be. Yeah, we all draw EVS drawing such and such character as Slave Leia.
Yeah, just go through all of them.
Yeah.
I think he should start with Power Girl, just for my own interests. And then I don't know, Zatanna would be good too, I guess.
Yeah.
Power Girl. Did you see? Is she still changed to the like little black girl, or did they revert on that?
Yeah, I think the last time either of them were seen, it was the real Power Girl trapped in some alternate dimension with the new Power Girl. I don't know what the plans are for them. I don't even know what comic this is, but both of them technically exist. They just aren't really being used.
Okay.
It's weird. I don't think they can make up their minds.
Time travel shenanigans.
Well, I think DC doesn't know how to handle Power Girl in this.
Oh, they don't.
In this day and age.
They don't. And it's like they should just like go all out with it. Okay, it's like we all know the kind of fans that gravitate towards Power Girl, and no amount of redesigns or whatnot are going to change. So they should just go all out with it. Okay, just give us the Power Girl we all like, and just put the backlash on mute. That's the logical thing to do, but I don't think it's going to happen for a while.
Yeah. Well, DC isn't using a ton of characters, so it's pretty easy for them to just put another one on the back burner.
Oh hell, it's just another day for DC.
Right.
It's not like Karen Starr is the only character they're failing to maximize on. They only have the exact same problem with, like, I don't know, 90% of their 99% even of their characters, but
they need
so what if you add another one to the pile?
They need to maximize Maxima.
Yeah. Oh, Maxima was never maximized. She was like this like super powerful chick. She I don't know, like almost as powerful as Superman, and yet they put her on like monitor duty every issue. She was just a walking waste of potential.
She was the only one, though. Didn't she help fight Doomsday in the Death of Superman?
Yeah, no, I haven't read Death of Superman.
Oh, yeah, the Justice League International's like really crappy, and they fight Doomsday before Superman gets there, and they all get wrecked, but Maxima kind of puts up a good fight. I liked that, but...
Interesting.
Yeah.
Larry King...
Oh, go ahead. Yeah,
this is kind of relevant to the Power Girl discussion. Larry King Undead brought this up during the last live stream. I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks, and he talked about, well, what about older comics? What if there was less of an emphasis on newer comics and more of an emphasis on older comics? And one reason I thought about that is that sort of feels like admitting defeat. Like, oh no, we don't have any good Power Girl anymore. So let's just go read old comic books and give up. And I don't like the idea. I don't think Larry King was saying that, but I don't like the idea of giving up on encouraging comic book companies to make new comics with characters and ideas we like. But I think there is some validity to saying that if we miss the old Power Girl, I mean, what are the top 10 best Power Girl stories? And that's where a kind of well-read comic fan has something that, the person who's kind of interested in Power Girl fan art, they think, oh, hey, this Power Girl looks kind of cute. I wonder which stories I should go read to find out about Power Girl. That's where the
JSA, right? JSA. Yeah. That's what they ought to do, is bring back the JSA. We need the JSA anyways. And yeah, have Power Girl lead it. Just let it before. I mean, Mr. Terrific's busy too, so that'd be perfect.
Yeah, like what the hell is going on with the JSA? They've been like using us with them for a while. But it's like, I mean, I assume this has something to do with Doomsday Clock. I assume that they're going to use them as like a platform for like JSA and Legion and hopefully a couple other characters. But it's like, just get on with it. I mean, Doom's delay clock, because they keep delaying it.
Dude, it's so brutal, Every time I see like issue 4, I was like, okay, now I got to reread issue 1 through 3 to remember what happened. Then issue 5 comes out, and I was like, I reread these, and I don't know. It's just, talk about killing my enthusiasm. I was so hyped for the first issue, and it's just steadily waned. And the drop in interest I had between 3 and 4, it's like you forget about the book. And then you see the ads for, the promos for the new one, and you're like, oh yeah, Doomsday Clock. I gotta get back into that. And oh look, there's pancake. He likes pancakes. That's so funny.
To be fair, Doomsday Clock is a guilty pleasure of mine. I'm enjoying it a lot more than I think I should. but I can agree that it has issues, especially with the release schedule.
I don't know. Well, I of course got to hold my final judgment until it's done. But like, dude, when have we seen Superman last? Issue 1?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I think I do agree that there's too much stuff going on.
When was Lex Luthor shot? Issue 2? We haven't seen him since then.
Yeah, it is bloated, but at the same time, it's more to do with just the lack of quality books on the shelves. But yeah, I am enjoying Doomsday Clock more than I should.
I mean, it's not bad by any means.
I mean, at least Johns is putting effort into it. At least the dude's actually trying. And just compared to everything else on the shelves, it just like feels like a masterpiece by comparison.
Yeah, and I mean, you can see why it's taking time. That art is good.
Yeah.
Gary Frank. See, I guess that's part of my problem. I mean, I'm still going to keep buying it, but that's part of my problem is Gary Frank. I really like when he draws Superman like he did New Krypton. And, you know, I got the variant cover for issue 1 with Superman and Dr. Manhattan on the cover, and there's just no Superman. It's like, come on, guy. I don't know. It is kind of cool. I mean, so Dr. Manhattan's basically God in DC now. I mean, he can bring people back to life, so.
Yeah.
But isn't DC famous for having like a much more powerful cast of characters than, for example, a Marvel? So would Dr. Manhattan? I mean, he is a very powerful character, but how would he rank? I don't know, against the New Gods or something.
Oh, way strong.
Yes, definitely.
Really?
I mean, I think the only DC character, major one at least, I can think of off the top of my head that would pose a threat to Manhattan is the Spectre, and even the Spectre is like a weird character. He just I don't even know how to describe the Spectre. He's too weird. I do know that he is pretty damn powerful,
and his power levels are all over the place too.
Yeah.
Like when he was on the JSA in the Golden Age, I don't think he was nearly as OP as he is probably now.
Well, I mean, that was the Golden Age. Like, things change.
True.
Now, so.
But I think the main thing that would matter in a fight between those two is does Dr. Manhattan probably has his soul still. So the only thing is with the Spectre, like, he can't really mess with anyone if they don't have a soul. So, like, Necron doesn't have a soul, so the Spectre basically couldn't touch him. But I imagine Dr. Manhattan would. But the big threshold in DC was being able to bring someone back to life. So, like, Lucifer Morningstar is crazy, ridiculously powerful. The Anti-Monitor is really powerful. Necron's really powerful. But none of them could bring someone back from the dead, and Dr. Manhattan has done that. So that's pretty OP.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, people come back from the dead all the time, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, but they don't come back that way.
Yeah.
Now, what would that mean, though, within the context of Alan Moore's universe, as opposed to within the context of the DC universe? Because, I don't know, like, if you brought characters from Dragon Ball into the DC universe, it'd be kind of weird because they operate under different laws of logic. So, when remind me in Alan Moore's book, like, does he have a concept of a soul, or is it a bit more like a kind of secular, oh, well, I'll reassemble the atoms and then you'll be alive without, you know, it's not like Dr. Manhattan goes into heaven and then brings down her soul. He's kind of like controlling particles on an atomic level, right?
Yeah.
I haven't read Watchmen in a while, but I'd assume it's the latter. It's like molecules and stuff as opposed to anything theistic.
Well, it's not even theistic. I don't know. I guess it would have to be, huh? But that's just how the Spectre is described. He is the physical embodiment of God's judgment. So he's extremely powerful, but if you don't have a soul to be judged, he can't touch you.
Remember when Hal Jordan was the Spectre?
Hal Jordan, I mean, he's Parallax, he's the White Lantern. He needs to settle down.
Yeah.
You don't see Guy Gardner getting into all this problems.
Well, he was a woman once.
What? He would not be an appealing woman. Oh, but I guess
no, it was like a joke issue from like the 80s. He like
I can't
turned
say
him
that
into a woman for a few issues.
Really? There was a female Lobo. He got changed into a female too, didn't he?
Yeah, Guy Gardner was a chick once,
Gosh.
and also there was his warrior phase where he
Yeah,
was like trying to be like the ultimate warrior.
nothing wrong with that. I should do that. Comic books.
What would we do without you?
What kind of for future live streams? What kind of I mean, one fun thing is to just talk about what's new in comics, Twitter, and YouTube. That's always going to be a gold mine, I feel. But what are things you'd hope to see in future live streams? This is probably for DC Fans United.
Well, my next live stream I already have planned. It's going to be next weekend, I think, probably on the 2nd or 3rd. It's just going to be me and one other friend, and we're going to talk about the DC animated movies. We had to narrow that down, so we're just going to talk about the new 52 universe ones. So that coincidentally had 10 movies. So we're going to each do a top 10 of those movies and basically compare. But going forward after that, there's a lot of things I'd like to do. I'm wanting to do this live stream once a week, and yeah, there's a lot of things we could do. We could try and get some artists from the community on. There's an inker who works for Valiant and DC. I've been trying to get on. I'd like to have on sometime. And there's always topics that pop up that we can talk about, even if they're really open-ended, like the state of comics. And I don't know, live streams seem to be pretty open-ended too. It's just a matter of getting some people on, and it kind of takes care of itself.
Yeah. I think this is a good avenue to go because, multiple perspectives, and you can kind of have a mix of both things. You can have a mix of, okay, here's what's new, and hey, here's some old comic books that we really dig that you could go check out. I think it's a pretty key thing to happen to kind of keep us from just, talking to ourselves or talking to our own little sub corners of YouTube all the time.
Yeah, people really get blinders on. Even I'm guilty of that sometimes. Like, I'll be on Twitter, and I mostly kind of interact with the DNC crowd, and then I'll go to Facebook or something, and they're just talking about Jawbreakers and how it's created by bigots and stuff. And I want to say something, but I'm just like, I don't know. And then I'll go to Reddit, and it's the same thing. And even if it's not something so controversial as that, I'll just be reminded that the comics world's a lot bigger than just the people you see on Twitter.
Yeah, I pretty much backed out of all that drama at this point. It got too much for me. So now I'm just like, I just want to interact with people who like my characters, and that's it. Just political differences aside, you like Wally West, we're cool. That's my new rule.
That's a good rule.
Mm-hmm.
I loved having to explain why Kid Flash isn't Speedy to kids in babysitting. That's going to be a perennial conversation. Why isn't Kid Flash called Speedy?
Just tell him he's called Speedy because he isn't called Red Arrow yet.
Good point, yeah.
Or Arsenal. After Brad Meltzer got a hold of him and tore his arm off.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it was James Robinson who actually wrote his arm.
Well, it happens in a couple books. I guess I'm thinking of Identity.
Oh, no, that was way before the arm torn off. Identity Crisis wasn't more. It's
No, I'm thinking of Cry for Justice. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Cry for Justice. That was James Robinson.
Really? Oh, my bad. Sorry, I'm getting my stuff mixed up. Yeah.
Oh, they're both terrible. I don't blame you.
Cry for Justice, not Identity Crisis. Yeah, Cry for Justice. I don't know. It's kind of cool how Prometheus tricked him and everything, but yeah, they took it way too far, killing his daughter and tearing his arm off.
Yeah.
Not cool.
Someone in chat says Roy Harper's called Speedy because he's a cokehead, and that's just too good a comics history meme for it not to get a shout out.
I think it was heroin, actually.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was needles. He was a needler.
Sherlock Holmes was the cocaine addict.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I know from musicians who've overdosed that you can inject cocaine as well, but yeah, I think it was heroin in the story.
Yeah. My ward is a junkie.
In any case, it was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
I took it. What was it? Oh, the anti-drug Spider-Man story. Let's see here. Oh, I remember why I thought about it, because in like the bonus features for the old Spider-Man movie, they talked about the drug issue of Green Arrow, and then they said, "Oh, well, we got to do our own drug issue." And I always liked I mean, I like Spider-Man generally, but I thought it was done in such a way that it was really a story about Harry Osborn overcoming a trial. So it worked as a story, and it also worked as an anti-drug PSA.
Yeah, that's true. Good message.
Well, I mean, I've had fun talking to you guys, but I think I should be going.
After midnight.
Yeah, we've run past our run time, so definitely want to thank everybody for stopping in and checking out the live stream. If you missed it, it's gonna render and it'll be up on the channel here pretty soon. Definitely check out #1 Marmaduke fans channel and Matt Invictus's YouTube channel as well. As you can see, they're pretty awesome guys, and their channels are cool too. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching and being a part of DC Fans United.